Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz, and I'm so excited that you are joining us today. We believe that healthy communication is oxygen for our relationships and our leadership. So whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we hope that our time today on the podcast encourages you, inspires you, and challenges you to choose to communicate in healthy ways. Well, today we're talking about stories. And if you've missed any of our Speaking from Behind a Screen series, just head to speakwithpeople.com/podcast and get caught up. This has been an incredible series. We have had the most amazing guests, and the interviews have been so rich, and they have dropped so much wisdom and insight. It's just been incredible. So we all know this. Stories bring life. Stories are life. Everyone loves a good story. They motivate us. They inspire us. And the great thing is we all have a story to tell. And so we get to tell the story of our lives. But how do we tell that story? And more specifically, how do we tell that story in 2023 and tell it online? Can just anyone tell their story? Can anyone be a digital storyteller? Well, this week we dive into exactly that on the Speak with People podcast. And I'm so excited because we have just an incredible digital storyteller to be able to ask these questions to. I know that I don't want to sound like a stalker, but I have watched many of his videos, and many of his videos have inspired me like crazy. I wish that I could finally get over the hump and try to do some of the digital storytelling that our guest does, because I've just been blown away, inspired. He's a pastor. He's an author of a great book, The Non-Anxious Pastor. I'm just so excited to welcome Trey Van Camp to the Speak with People podcast. Welcome, Trey.
Jason, thank you so much. I've been watching your channel for a while now as well. I'm rooting for you guys. Flattered to be here. And if you can give that kind of intro before I walk into every room, I would appreciate that. You know, I'm feeling good about my life right now, so I'm
Perfect.
grateful for you.
I love it. Well, hey, before we hop into the questions, have some conversation, I'd love for you to just give our listeners a little bit more insight into your story, who you are, what you do, your family, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I born and raised here in Arizona. So I'm in Queen Creek, Arizona, which is the East Valley of Phoenix. And this is where we started our church 7 years ago, which is insane to say out loud. It's been 7 years. But I married my high school sweetheart, Jordan. And so actually this next month, June 1st, is our 10-year anniversary. So we've been together 10 years strong.
Congrats.
In a row. And thank you. Appreciate that. And then we have 3 little girls, Faith, Selah, and Trinity, and so 8, 6, and 5. So we have a full house. I am the last man standing, to the glory of God. Even our dog is a girl, so here we are.
Oh, wow.
But I love it. I love it so much. And so 7 years ago we started a church. I'm 4th generation pastor, and really felt called to plant a church, even though I grew up a church planter's kid. When I was 12, my father planted a church, and we went through a lot of heartache. And those first 6 years of me being still in the house before going off to college, I really got just a hold of the scriptures, and the scriptures got a hold of me. In junior high, I surrendered my life to the ministries. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that my life needed to be used to communicate the gospel to the world. And really, 1 Kings 18 was the passage that I read that a preacher was preaching. And this idea of someone standing up, even though it feels like you're alone. Meanwhile, you remember that story? There's hundreds of people who still believe in Yahweh, but you stand up and go toe to toe and declare the glory of God and have God show up in a powerful way. Just really felt called in that text to do that for my generation. I don't know what that fully looks like, but it looks more and more like, there's a lot of people kind of hiding from their Christian faith today. So trying to find a way to share that with full of love and full of grace and full of truth. So 6 years ago, I started documenting my journey of being a church planter, new husband, father. 6 years ago now, last January, and been a big part of my story. And I assume it's why I'm here today. So I'm excited to talk about that part of my life.
I love it. I love it. It's been, I know it's probably been difficult, to document all of that. I know it's probably been so fulfilling at times. What really did get you over the hump to start doing that?
Yeah, a big part of my story is I never watched YouTube. I'm a big productivity guy. I never played. I have never. I guess that's not true, but I was about to say I've never owned a video game console, so I've never played video games at my own house. I just go to other friends, and eventually, you play a little bit. But so I
Yep.
just have always been outside. I'm a sports guy, so never really been tied to my phone. And so even in college, everybody talked about YouTube, and I just was like, that's not for me. I'm not interested at all. But I've always loved movies. I've always loved stories. I've always loved books, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. But 6 years ago, actually, I was on Facebook. Sorry, 7 years ago, maybe then. I was on Facebook and I saw an ad. It's a long route, but I saw an ad from Gary Vee of all people. I'm assuming you've heard of Gary
Oh
Vee.
yeah.
And there was something that grabbed my attention, so I clicked, and his most recent video at that time was an interview with Casey Neistat. And so I was like, who's this Casey Neistat guy? And it's funny because Casey's way more popular than Gary Vee. So it's funny how Gary Vee was the one who introduced me to Casey. But I watched some of his videos. I had never heard of the medium of vlogging, had no idea people were using YouTube like this. And I have a background with my dad being a church planter. I just love to create. So I would make videos for them, but I was always behind the camera.
Hmm.
But I want to speak for a living. So I was like, wait a minute, I can actually be in front of the camera too, and then edit it on the back end. So it blew me away. So within a month of me finding out that this was a thing, I looked on Craigslist, bought a used Sony A6300, just used the in-camera mic, pressed record, and uploaded the next week. And the rest is history. I've just been, for about a 4-year streak, I uploaded at least 3 videos per week. Life has hit
Wow.
me a lot since then. I would daily vlog all the time. Ask Dennis. It was crazy. I don't know why I did it. But I never really thought, like, I just had no issue pressing record. I had no issue pressing publish until recently. Now I think I've had that imposter syndrome and
Mm.
all those other things a lot of people deal with. I did not deal with in the first 4 years of making YouTube videos.
Wow.
Probably speaks more to my arrogance than anything. And so God has done a lot to humble me. But yeah, I didn't know about it. I found out and just started doing it and just have learned a lot along the way.
That's incredible. I remember watching one of your videos. You I think you were in a room, a restaurant with Casey. I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
remember. Yeah, yeah. I
Yep.
was like, oh my goodness, he's near Casey.
Yeah, it was the coolest. I'll share this story real quick. The week before, my wife asked me, we're on a road trip to Disneyland. Disneyland's a part of our life a lot.
Oh yeah.
And she said, if you were to meet one person in the world, who would it be? And I've had such a blessed life. I've met Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Steve, like anybody in the NBA, the MLB. Like
Wow.
I've met a lot of pastors that I really respect and adore. And I was like, babe, this is really weird, but I would love to meet Casey Neistat. Like, she's like, really? Anybody in the world? And then I got a call from my friend who got invited to a Casey event, only 40 creators, and he was allowed to bring a +1. And he said, hey, you want to come? You just have to find a way to buy a ticket to New York. Samsung will pay for your hotel, for the
Get out.
food, for everything else. Just get there. And so I made a YouTube video, said, hey guys, I have an opportunity. I need $600. And I raised it within like 2 hours on my channel. And yeah, one of my favorite stories of my life. It was
Wow.
unbelievable. Within 1 week, I was shaking his hand, and it was crazy. Unbelievable.
I love it. I love it. We tried.
Yeah.
We were the stalker type once where we were at a family trip going through New York. And I actually I made my son stand outside his, his infamous office,
Yes.
and he
Use the
held a
kid.
sign, Casey, would you please? But we never
Amazing. It
did.
didn't work.
It didn't work. So
Oh man, he was working. Too
he was
bad.
doing it. Well, that's amazing. So you have, kind of, I mean, I have followed your journey just because I think you are, an incredible digital storyteller. The way that you're able to,
Thank you.
weave in themes and stories. And so we're in this series on the podcast called Speaking from Behind a Screen, because even if you're, a novice or you want to get better at telling stories online, so much of our communication is happening from behind screens nowadays. And so this series, we're trying to dive into how can, we just become a more effective one. And so today, especially this conversation about being a digital storyteller, I mean, stories are life. People are drawn to them. So how would you define, how would you say, okay, this is what digital storytelling is. This is what the digital storyteller is. Is it unique to different, other different storytelling methods?
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, so YouTube has really, Christian YouTube has really morphed into just being like a place where people, speak into cultural topics and, and just preach at people. And I love your tagline, speak with people, not at people. And
Thanks.
so to me, storytelling is speaking with people, bringing them along the journey. And so I kind of always said like digital storytelling to me, I really take a lot of cues from King David, because what's
Mm,
wonderful about King David in the scriptures is both his journey and his journal,
mm,
right? So his journey is recorded in First Samuel, Second Samuel, right? First, Second Kings. You see a lot of his story, his journey, but then we have his journal in the book of Psalms. To me, a wonderful story on digital storytelling is both showing the journey and interposing with the journal my own reflections of that moment, how I'm dealing with those things. And so digital storytelling is a beautiful way because you can like record the B-roll. You can show the moment that you're talking about.
right.
Um, and so it's just such a powerful medium to meet people where they're at. I know Andrew Peterson, he's like a musician. He's written a lot of books. I've really picked up on him recently. And he had this line where he said, if you want people to know the truth, how did he say it? If you want people to know the truth, just tell them the truth. But if you want them to love the truth, then tell them a story.
Oh,
And so that's really the idea of the story of my life is my medium that I use online. And man, there's so much truth I want people to know, but I realize, okay, one theme, one story at a time. And in the aggregate, maybe I can really inspire people to keep pursuing Jesus. I have found because I share the story of my life as a pastor, by the grace of God, I've been able to encourage a lot of other pastors,
mm,
which was never my goal.
yep.
But I guess it makes sense because it's who I am. Right. And so I've really been grateful of that. Like, wow, I've been able to just encourage people. Hey, I got embarrassed in front of a lot of people, but I'm
Yep.
still going, and and I don't have to say, and you can keep going too. No, they just see me doing it, and then they
Yep.
invite themselves into that story and participate in that kind of truth as well.
Wow, that's so good. So as you, I mean, I love the vulnerability that you've brought. I love the authenticity. I mean, you've invited people into your story, your family story. How has that impacted you? How has that impacted your family by inviting, people to kind of have that glimpse into your story?
Yeah, thankfully, my wife and my kids. I can't speak for my kids, and it's actually why I don't include them as much now because I thought
Hmm.
they have the right to decide. So when I include them, it's very general. It's not
Yeah.
about their life. But my wife loves it, so that's been helpful. It's also been great because we're actually in an area in Arizona. I think about this first and foremost as a pastor,
Mm,
and we've had a lot of moral failures, in our area as pastors. And so I think, man, I'm also younger. Like I started my church when I was 24,
mm.
which 10 out of 10 would not recommend. I actually say that in my book. Like, who let me do this? How dumb can you be? So I'm 31 now, with 3 kids and a little more experience under my belt, but still. So me being young, like it's already a negative. It's hard. And so I think gaining people's trust is huge. And so I've been
Mm,
really grateful those who have been kind of just even dabbling, figuring out what church to go to in our area or whatever. Seeing a vlog of mine, there's like a bond of trust that I can create. And so even for the prime example is I have just decided I'm a fourth generation pastor. So I know a lot of pastors and I have seen a lot, thankfully not in my family, but just I've seen a lot of pastors in general be so fake,
mm,
and I think it's damaging to their congregation. I've seen that in real time, but it's also damaging to their own soul. And so like my dad was, I guess, fortunate enough. He didn't start ministry till he was 40.
oh
I
wow.
started technically when I was 16. I'm like, I got to do this in a way that when I'm 65, I still love it.
Mm,
And so I just want to be genuine in what I do. And if that means it's going to hurt me along the way, I'll take that because I want to sleep well at night.
yep.
I want to feel like I just really am who I am. Now I've had to learn the difference between like being vulnerable and transparent. So like I think I could be vulnerable with everyone, but there are certain things I'm just not going to be transparent with everyone because there's
Yeah.
certain things you don't need to know, right? Like so figuring that out has been hard for me. So I overshare. So I have learned that. So trying to figure out how to take that back. But to answer your question, it's gained people's trust. The prime example I was going to refer to is 1 year ago, we almost moved to California. It's a long story that's on my channel, but I was out of nowhere. I wasn't asking for it, but it looked like I was going to be taking a job in California at a really large church that was debt free, that was really set up to really help start new church plants. And so I did not want to do it. And eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to have to be obedient. Let me walk through the door. And we got all the way up to the very end. And before it became official, I told my church, I said, hey guys, here's what's going on. Next week, I'm preaching in view of a call. It's not official yet, but you need to know where we're at, because I don't want you to find out any other way except through me. Here's what's going on. Yeah. And I've had a lot of pastors tell me how stupid that was, and how, because I didn't get the job, so it really looked like, man, what a pain that I added to my church. However, we're in a digital world now. That my sermon in view of a call was going to be live on Facebook and YouTube. Someone would have found it. I would rather them know ahead of time, right? So what actually served me well was my honesty with my church ahead of time. When I honestly came back and said, hey, it didn't work, I want to love and serve you still, will you let me? It actually gained more of a trust versus, hey, by the way, I've always been here, but I almost got a job last week, but then it got canceled. You don't need to know that. Let's just move on. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So being vulnerable brings a lot of pain, but it also develops a way better sense of trust.
Wow, that's good. I mean, I love what I think it's Brene Brown who says clarity is kindness. I mean, it's amazing. Just that healthy communication process of you going, here it is. I mean, people are able to lean in with that type of vulnerability. I love that. So let's talk about the digital storytelling process for a second. As you go to tell a story, what are some of the key elements or techniques that you use as you're putting together that story? Because you're also unique that you stand up in front of people every week and you communicate and tell stories, face to face, but then you tell these, stories online. So what are some of the elements for you as you're putting together those, your vlogs or your, stories or videos like that?
That's a great question. I kind of use like a threefold framework to help me understand what the story is and where I'm going. So I'm a Baptist, so I have a major rhyming problem. So here we are. So the first one is tension. The second is intervention. And then the last one is invitation. So tension, intervention, invitation. I actually use that in my sermon flow too, but I certainly use it in a vlog. So I need to introduce attention right away. That's the hook. So if there isn't a problem, then what's the point of of continuing to watch? Which I think is why a lot of like what I would label toxic YouTube Christian channels that go viral and do well is because they're always talking about problems. So people watch because they're like, oh my gosh, is this guy a heretic? Is that? So it's embedded that there is a hook, right? And so this isn't me, whatever. I'm going to leave that there and move on. So there needs to be a tension. Aaron Sorkin, he said every good story has intention and obstacle, right? So you find the character, he wants something, but then there's an obstacle that gets in the way of it, which is why West Wing was such a great show, by the way. Yep. So there needs to be a tension. What is the tension? And then there needs to be intervention. So now the story to me is me finding ways to solve this tension, finding ways to solve the problem, right? Or me wrestling or dealing with the aftermath of the bad thing that happened. And then invitation is essentially, here's my resolve. Here's the moment I realized, okay, this is the answer. This is what I should do. And just kind of not like tying it up in a perfect bow, but like there is a sense of resolve that I'm moving forward. You ever read that book, Storyworthy, by Matthew Dix? Have you heard of that before?
Oh yeah. No, my co-host Dennis, he brought me onto that. Such a powerful book.
Oh, good. Yeah. And I love that he just says like every story is like a 5-second realization that leads to transformation, right? So you can share a story, like, and vlogs always fall into this trap. I can share a story. Let me think of something that I've done recently. Let's just talk about this morning. I took my dog to the vet, right? So I can say, hey, everybody, I'm taking my dog to the vet. we've been having issues with her for a month. Let's go. All right. Show us going into the vet's office, showing me waiting in the office, right, as she's back there. And then the dog comes back and now we're in the truck. Okay, cool. There's a beginning, middle, and end. That's not a story though, right?
Right.
But for me, a story in that was really anxious, because of the finances that has been imposed on this issue. But it's like, do I really, like, I actually had a realization this morning as we were taking and making the final payment for this dog. Like, I really value this dog. It's a part of the family. I know this is a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's worth it, And so I've actually come to resolve there's a few things in my house I don't need anyways. I'm just going to sell it. So I can even show me trying to sell it and just kind of resolving, this was the right decision to make. I was in the office realizing, my kids, they love this dog. This is worth the pain. We're going to move forward. I don't know. I'd probably make the story a little better, but that was just a quick example, right? It's more of the journal reflection. And there was that moment where I did realize this morning, this is worth it, although this is painful. And I'm going to find ways to just make up for the money I lost, and we're going to keep moving forward. So there's a way to tell a story and then a way to really tell the story. And so I try to do that part, the reflection part, the hard stuff, the vulnerable stuff, but you have a realization that leads to transformation.
Oh, that's so good because, the beginner storyteller, they make common mistakes like, oh my goodness, I have the funniest story to tell you. Like, don't set yourself up like that. But what I love that what you just encouraged us to do is kind of go deeper into the story and try to bring that through. I'm curious, because I have filmed quite a bit, out in public. Did that take a while for you to get used to, and then dealing with other people's, reaction to you having your camera, those kind of things?
Oh yeah. What I have to do is just look right at the lens and just tunnel vision. That's just my solution. I look right at it and go for it and deal with the consequences later. It's like a muscle too, where if you do it a lot, it gets easier. But then if you stop, your muscles atrophy. And so I've noticed that when like recently I've been taking my camera out in public again, which I just haven't done in a while. And it's like, this is a lot harder than I thought. So it's just an obstacle to overcome, but it's definitely weird.
Yeah. So, a guy like me, I've been telling stories for a long time. I'm an old guy. And so, there's a craft to it, right? There's a story craft as you're, with the audience, and you're able to look them in the eyes, and you're able to use your voice inflection, and you're able to, play off their energy. Now you're telling stories, digitally. What are some of those specific challenges or opportunities, that come into the digital space? How can you navigate those, and make the most out of them?
Well, I think the temptation in the digital world is to beg for attention. But what you need to do is hold their attention, and there's a difference, right? And so begging for attention, you're willing to forego your principles maybe, or you are always rushed, right? And the best stories leave room to calibrate for silence, right? And so you do need to establish the hook fast, but you don't need to there's a way to edit and to talk like you're begging them to keep staying. That's actually kind of what turns me off to some of like the Mr. Beastification videos that we see these days. Oh my gosh, just yelling, but wait till you see this and wait till you see that. And it's just like, yeah, that works great for a 12-year-old, but I am 31, like I don't need to be begged to keep this attention. So realizing who your audience is huge too in telling the story. Like when you realize, hey, a 12-year-old's not going to watch this, so I don't need to be crazy. I don't need my thumbnail to look like Mr. Beast's. Like I have a different audience, and so I'm going to talk to them knowing who my audience is. So I think it's a huge temptation in digital storytelling. What are the people on top doing, and how can I do that? Well, that's, it's the same way as like a pastor who, is a pastor of a 100-person church. You're not going to talk to your people like the pastor of the 10,000-person church. It's just a different dynamic. And so own that dynamic, own where you're at, own who your audience is and isn't, and quit begging for that attention, because it's not serving anybody in a real way. It actually makes me turn off. Okay, he's he's not letting this sit. He's not letting this simmer. He doesn't trust that I'm going to make these conclusions. He is force feeding it down my throat. And I don't appreciate that. So I'm going to
Yeah.
move on.
That's so powerful. I mean, it's so easy to be noticed online if it feels like you dance, you take off your clothes, you're unbelievably negative, or you're unbelievably dirty. It's like, okay, no
Exactly.
wonder those creators, their views go like this. So, that's so rich to be able to think about, okay, we stop begging for it, hold their attention by providing, bringing them into the story. I just love that. When it comes to building your audience, like, how has that been for you as you built an online audience, on this platform? Like, you got people commenting, great things. You got people commenting not so great things. Like, what have you learned about cultivating and building your online audience?
Yeah. Depending on who you talk to, some would say I have a large audience. I would say I don't. I have a pretty small audience because you're always looking at the people ahead of you, not
Right.
the people behind you. And so I like to always say we need to be grateful for those who are ahead of us and gracious to those who are behind us. However, so for me, what I think I've done well is I've cultivated a deep community. I talk to people, I've made the effort of making extra Facebook groups, making a course for pastors who want to do this as well. And we do Zoom calls. Like, I have a Patreon, which the last year, because of that California thing, I honestly, and writing a book, it just took a lot out of me. So I really, this last year, didn't cultivate that community. I just didn't have the energy in me to do it. And so I'm really grateful because I feel like there's a new day full of new mercies for me in this season. And so kind of recalibrating that calendar, we're Zoom calling every Monday again, and also those sorts of things. But that takes a lot of work. But I think it takes a lot of clarity, right? Like, what is my channel for and what is it not for? Who am I talking to? Who am I not talking to? But yeah, taking that time to reply to every comment. By the grace of God, because I've done ministry long enough in person, when people make negative comments about me online, I legit don't lose an ounce of sleep. It doesn't bother
Yeah.
me at all. If anything, I find the humor in it. You
Yep.
talk bad about me and you're in my congregation, I'm wrecked. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's weird. But when it's like, hey, I can just say, you're not a real person. I kind of just
Yep.
think that way. If you're slamming me, it's not because you hate me. You just hate all Christians or something,
Yep.
so I really don't lose sleep over that. And so I think that's given me an edge. I know I talked to a lot of pastors. It really sends them, and I hate that, sends them
Yeah.
into a dark place.
Yeah.
And so I've even talked about, I told my wife, if we get to a certain point where it really blew up, I would never hire out an editor because I love editing, because I love storytelling. But I would hire out the admin. Hey, you upload it, you comment and reply. I don't want to know the toxic stuff happening.
Yeah.
That's something to outsource, honestly.
Yep. That's good. Have you used social media much to amplify your storytelling? I mean, or are you just put it on YouTube and then, kind of go, or do you use your social media to kind of point back to that?
I certainly have done that in the past, where you make like a 1-minute version, you make a short and then you put it on all your channels, at the very least, because everybody can share a link on Instagram now. So I do that. I show the thumbnail, the title. And then after some people leave some comments, I snapshot some of those comments and put it on my Instagram stories. But for my own health, I have not done that as much. I've just counted that as it's not worth it to spend all of this time trying to promote the video. I just have a lot more joy going to the next one.
Yep.
And I think it's because, and this is really important, this is a hobby, and it's always going to be a hobby for me.
Yeah.
Ministry is my calling. And so my sermon prep is first and foremost. My counseling, all the stuff I do as a pastor is first and foremost. And so really, video editing and stuff is kind of the things where I'm in my lull, right? Like at 2:00, I don't have anything left in the tank for ministry. Let me make a video, right? It keeps me going. It's a lot of joy. So it's a side project. It's a hobby. I would never want to go full time. I can't imagine the burdens of living at the mercy of an algorithm, for my income. Like, I would totally start making bad videos because it's what would feed my children. So I don't want to put myself in that spot. I don't do all the best practices, and I know that. But I've been really, as a follower of Jesus, for me, simplicity is really big. I talk about that in my book too, about like from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., I'm not on anything electronic. And then from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., I'm not either. So 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. is 5:10 to win. So I need to win my morning. I need to be in the scriptures. I need to be writing a sermon. And then 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. is 5:10 for them. I need to be in relationships. I need to look face to face. I don't need to be bogged down with the phone. So those are like huge principles for me. And I can look back, like even the last 3 weeks. Last week, I didn't do that well. I was on my phone a lot. I was not the same person. My energy was drained. My creativity was flat. I couldn't make anything, right? So really giving myself those boundaries for me personally, especially knowing ministry is so heavy. It's not always hard, but it's always heavy. I don't need to add these other burdens on my plate.
Yep. Boy, that's so good. And I'm not good with alliteration, but I think I've even commented on your social media in the past, like, I love even how the simplicity of how you put that. I mean, that is so powerful. So that's a really good framework. Okay. So last question, speak to our listener who's like, okay, I just want to get started. I want to start telling some stories online. What would you suggest? How would you guide them?
Okay. 2 guiding principles would be, because we get caught up in the technical, and I think just pick a phone, pick a camera, pick an editing software. Like we get too caught up with that, right? The 2 things that I think have held people back more than that, even though they don't realize it. First thing I say all the time is personal is more powerful than professional, right? So be yourself, use what you have, share your story. Don't act like you're something else, right? Own where you're at. Yep. I've actually found even in my own church plant world, we're a smaller church and we own that. And we've actually found more success once we finally just named what everyone already knew, right? Like we're not going to act like we're Life Church. Like we're not Craig Rochelle. Okay, cool. Let's move on, So personal is more powerful than professional. Don't be fake. Don't act like something you're not. But also use social media not to get validation, but to give value. So every story you make, you can do it either to get validation or to give value. I don't think you can do both at the same time. You got to pick one. And so really finding out who your audience is and say, okay, what would be valuable to this person? You're going to make great videos. You're going to make great stories. If you're thinking, how can I get more views? How can I get more this and that? This validation factor, you're going to be swaying, back and forth like the wind. And it's not going to be fulfilling. It's going to be exhausting.
That's so powerful. You just can't go wrong. Others focused. Part of our speak with people, not at them. We talk about the not at them part. When you speak at people, you're really making you all about everything. When you speak with people, you're others focused, and it's just you just win when you're others focused. It's just incredible. Amen. It's just incredible.
That's right.
Well, we could talk forever. I want to honor your time. I just appreciate this. I mean, this is just absolutely incredible. Before I let you leave, though, I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. Our listeners can kind of keep getting to know you. Do you have a favorite, digital storyteller, or a favorite YouTuber, or a favorite, online entrepreneur that way that you're just kind of your go-to? You love to watch and be a part of their community.
I know this is rapid fire. I have a long answer. I'll make it short. The quick one is Casey Neistat. He's always been my inspiration. But like someone that I really appreciate, but it's not digital per se. This kind of out of left field, but is Quentin Tarantino, because hear me out. I don't appreciate his violence or language or any of that. It's more of his interviews about his process of making movies. He's a gatherer of information, and he loves to learn from everybody, and then he makes his own version of it. And I love to think that that's what I am. First and foremost, even as a preacher, I'm an editor. So I gather things and then I cut it out and I try to make it clear. So I'm very much influenced by everyone around me, and I use that as a part of my storytelling. So I love to learn from everyone, and so Tarantino does a great job of that.
I love that. Is there a podcast, either for your growth or for guilty pleasure that you enjoy one way or the other?
Let's answer guilty pleasure. It is Pod Meets World. It is
Pod Meets World.
Topanga, Eric, and Sean from Boy Meets World review all of the episodes. I am in. I haven't missed a single episode. I think Boy Meets World is the greatest show of all time. So awesome. Pod Meets World, my brother.
I love that one. That's probably the best answer we've got so far to that question.
It's pathetic.
I love that.
Hmm.
I know you know a little bit about Disney. Um,
Oh man,
and this
yes.
could be its own, series of podcasts, but is there one pro tip, you would give?
The easiest one is rope drop. You better get there first,
Mm,
and you do the biggest rides first. The rest of your day is going to be amazing. So get up early, don't be late, and you won't regret it. You can take a nap in the middle of the day. It doesn't
yep.
matter, but get there at opening.
I love it. I love it. Well, Trey, goodness, thank you so much for joining us. Before you sign off, where can we send our listeners to go find out more about you and what you do and all that?
Yeah, the best one-stop shop is just my personal website. So it's treyvancamp.com. There you can see my YouTube channel, the book I wrote, any other kind of ventures that I'm doing, my church, all that kind of stuff. So just treyvancamp.com, like you're camping in a van, van camp.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again for being on the Speak with People podcast. And thank you to our listeners for being a part of the Speak with People podcast. Before you leave, I just want to make sure you're reminded there is this incredible, robust community that awaits your presence. It's in our Speak with People Facebook group. If you just go to Facebook and you type in Speak with People community group, you'll find this community of leaders who are looking to become more effective, empathetic, and captivating communicators. We have posts and videos and polls and live interviews where we just kind of take all this content that we're learning and we continue to grow in our communication. Also, if you're looking to improve your public speaking skills, your storytelling, how you put your content together, how to get rid of the ums when you communicate, coaching is an incredible way to do that. And Speak with People has a public speaking skills coaching plan just for you. If you go to speakwithpeople.com/coaching, you can get more information and you can schedule a discovery call with me and we'll figure out when and how is the best way for you to start. Thanks again. Make sure that you check out Trey Van Camp's website. I'm telling you, if you're a pastor or ministry leader, his book is fantastic. I bought it when it first came out, and it was huge in my life, and I appreciated his words that he did. Thank you again for being a part of the podcast. Thanks for every listen, every share, and every review. It just means the world. Again, this podcast exists because healthy communication is oxygen for our relationships and our leadership. So we hope that this time together inspires you to breathe life into the world and use words that change your world. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.